Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. We gotta continue to expose this leftist hypocrisy. I absolutely despise how leftists pretend as if they have a total monopoly on compassion. They always claim that Republicans are deeply evil, cynical, selfish people who don't care about others. But they, the virtuous leftists, they care. And obviously this is the narrative that they attempt to push relating to immigration. They reframe the narrative around seeking asylum. Completely ridiculous. 3 million people crossed the border last year, or last fiscal year. You mean to tell me there's 3 million asylum seekers crossing the southern border in a single year? Simply impossible. Maybe a couple thousand, maybe a couple tens of thousands of legitimate asylum seekers. The rest are obviously economic migrants. But of course the reason they use the whole asylum seeking thing is to play to your heartstrings and to make it seem as if they're the compassionate folk who care about the most vulnerable and marginalized people. It's a complete scam. And I don't need to tell you it's a scam. Democrats, every now and then, suffer what's called a Freudian slip, where they say the quiet part out loud, and the true agenda is revealed. They are not the compassionate, caring people that they pretend to be. They're power-hungry, self-interested politicians preying on emotional people. Let me show you guys exactly what I mean by that. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Alright, so we know the leftist narrative, I laid it out in the intro, but the reality is, Democrats want two things. They want a subservient underclass that will do cheap labor, and they want a subservient underclass that will vote them into power, giving them complete control of Washington. We all remember this clip from Ozzy Osbourne's daughter, back when she was a host on The View.
And if you kick every Latino out of this country, then who is going to be cleaning your toilet, Donald Trump?
Oh, that's no.
In the sense that,
No.
You know what I mean? Like, when I'm saying that...
Well, that was a horrible moment, but it was also an eye-opening moment. Well, what if I told you that moment essentially replayed itself with a different individual, except this time, it was a top Democrat in Congress? Here's Jerry Nadler.
And we need immigrants in this country. Forget the fact that the farm, that our vegetables would rot in the ground if they weren't being picked by many immigrants, many illegal immigrants. The fact is that the birth rate in this country is way below replacement level, which means our population is going to start shrinking. And the ratio of people on Social Security and Medicare is going to increase relative to the number of people supporting them.
If we didn't have illegal migrants, then who would pick up our vegetables? You see the picture, right? They frame the narrative as if they're caring for people, but really they want cheap labor, a subservient serf class. What they really want, essentially, is modern slavery. It's absolutely absurd. They want to continue to enable major corporations to dominate all aspects of business and production. And of course, the way you do that is through cheap labor. Screw independent businesses and farms. They want big corporations dominating entire industries by essentially importing a foreign army of the working poor. I don't know, maybe I'm living in fairy tale land, but I'd like to see Americans working even the hard labor jobs, and I'd like those hard labor jobs to pay decent wages. I have this idea in my head that if we maybe got rid of some regulations and some crazy taxes, that if maybe we stopped shipping money overseas or really relying on cheap crap from overseas, that maybe, just maybe, we could foster an environment where companies focus on domestic production and paid good wages to their employees, and American citizens would thrive. Maybe it's a fairy tale land and it's unrealistic, or maybe it's possible to achieve maybe a fraction of this vision. I have to believe in it because the alternative is helping to create the greatest wealth disparities in modern human existence. Why do you think the wealth gap is widening? Well, I'll tell you, importing cheap labor has something to do with it. Current immigration policies, whether legal immigration or even illegal immigration, benefits the 1%. If anything, it benefits the 0.1%. It benefits the people leading major corporations who can continue to enrich themselves off cheap, essentially modern-day slave labor. Meanwhile, regular Americans continue to fall behind. Democrats claim that they care about the little guy, but all of their policies benefit the rich, wealthy elite, and, Republicans are guilty of this as well. Let's not forget the Koch brothers are Republicans. Well, they represent that same elitist big corporation interest. It's all about cheap labor. The Freudian slips tell you all that you need to know. And if it's not about cheap labor, it's about how congressional seats are handed out every 10 years after the census. Which is funny because now it seems like New York is slowly starting to embrace the illegal migrant crisis that's been thrusted upon them after losing hundreds of thousands of residents, fleeing to the greener pastures of places like Florida. New York Democrats are starting to open their eyes to a new opportunity.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York. We have a diaspora that can absorb
a significant number of these migrants. And when I hear colleagues talk about, the doors of the inn being closed, no room in the inn, I'm saying, I need more people in my district, but just for redistricting purposes. And those members could clearly fit here.
They need more people in their district for redistricting purposes. Well, doesn't that tell you everything that you need to know? They get more seats if they have bigger population. Let's keep counting illegal migrants in the US Census in places like California and New York and others, illegitimately growing their footprint in the US federal government. It's crazy. I mean, they say the quiet part out loud constantly, but we're supposed to buy that their perspective comes from a genuine place of compassion and care. Give me a break. All they do is lie, lie, and lie. An open border, amnesty for all stance is not a stance of compassion. It's a selfish stance that overlooks human suffering on both sides for political and economic benefit. Who wins with open borders, with a massive southern border crisis? It certainly isn't the people, it's not the community members who are being overrun across the nation, whose economies can't cope with the increase in people. It certainly isn't the uneducated citizen who faces more competition in the workforce, creating more downward pressure on his or her wages. And it certainly isn't the migrants who are being sold the false dream of a path towards being documented, only to get deported or live a life constantly looking over their shoulders, worried about being caught by immigration authorities as they continue to work under the table collecting cash, not paying taxes, and in many cases shipping the money back to their home country. And it certainly isn't the children who are being caught up in these human smuggling and human trafficking rings, in some cases kidnapped, abused, lost forever. Joe Biden pretends as if he's so empathetic and compassionate on the issue of immigration, but if you look at the facts, what is his administration doing other than enabling the cartels and enabling human suffering? And here's a Biden policy to make that point. Activists send letter to President Biden asking to resume DNA testing at the US-Mexico border. San Diego activists sent a letter to President Joe Biden on Tuesday asking him to re-implement DNA tests at the southern border to try to reduce the sex trafficking of children. Karina from Guatemala encountered her experience being subjected to one of the DNA tests at the San Isidro point of entry in June of 2021. She said that it was a long process that made her children nervous and her 6-year-old daughter curious. A swab under the tongue, all over the mouth. To the children, it was something simple. It does not hurt or anything. San Diego County District 5 Supervisor Jim Desmond signed the letter sent to President Biden. Desmond says that it cannot be tolerated that 50% of the 8,000 cases of trafficking that occur in the year in San Diego are of children. Unfortunately, on June 1st of this year, President Biden's administration stopped DNA testing on families. And what happens is that families crossing the border ask for asylum and have their interview, but many times these children are being trafficked. This is a Trump policy. When adults show up at a point of entry or are apprehended crossing the border illegally, the Trump administration was doing DNA tests to make sure that those children were accompanied with their parents. In many cases, you have human traffickers who are pretending to be the parents of these children, only to then put them directly into the human trafficking pipeline, which is a quite nefarious world. Let's just leave it at that. This was a policy that saved thousands of children from a world of nightmare and pain. But compassionate Joe Biden decided that he was going to end it. In other words, he decided that he has no interest in protecting children. Compassion, folks. This is possibly one of the biggest points of hypocrisy with the left. And my only hope for this video is that I made that case well enough for some people to see the whole picture. That's what I got for you guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.